We've all seen the statements online, train like you fight, and we've seen people online saying how important it is to train in their kit or to lift with their kit and work out and stuff. I've also seen a lot of people online ask me specifically and others where to go and train because they want to wear their kit, but they can't do it at an indoor range. We've also seen the videos of guys who go to indoor ranges, throw all their kit on, and they get made fun of. So the whole idea of training in your battle rattle and in your equipment is a subject of conversation that I think should be approached and should be, taken apart because I have seen productive ways of training in equipment or with equipment, and I've also seen less productive ways. I've also experienced both ends of the spectrum. I've trained in kit for most of my 10 years. I also thought it was the most useful thing to do, throw all this stuff on, come to the range and shoot, run around, shoot all kinds of drills. And I've learned over time, and I've learned over the years, that is not always the most productive way to approach getting better at shooting. So I want to get into that, but before I do, I want to give a full disclaimer that if you guys want to go to the range and you want to put on your cool cry pants, you want to put on your expensive plate carrier that you spent thousands of dollars piecing together, you want to get your money's worth out of your helmet that you bought, and you want to wear all that every Saturday when you go to the range, awesome. Do that, be happy, do the things with your friends. That's great and awesome. However, if you're someone who is interested in getting better at shooting, the martial art of shooting, because it is a martial skill. It's not just like this thing over here that you shouldn't be thinking about. Like if you want to be a prepared citizen or a prepared individual, you are going to need a level of proficiency with the firearm, and that is a martial skill. And so what we're talking about is how do we best develop that martial skill in the least amount of time? Because ultimately, most of you guys watching this probably can only train on the weekend. You can only train maybe once a week. And you should want to be as good as possible in the least amount of time possible. And that's been my focus for the last few years, is trying to find more efficient ways of training that enable you guys who don't work a job like I do, where I can shoot 2-3 days a week, but where you guys can be truly proficient and really proficient by only training, with only training a couple times a month. And I do think there's ways of doing that that a lot of other instructors have not explored or haven't looked into. And I hope that more people will look into that, because I think people can get very good at shooting in a very short amount of time, and they're actually being held back by just really bad habits and some bad gun culture and whatnot. And one of those pieces of gun culture that I think is holding people back is the idea that you should train in kit every time you go to the range. So let's dive into that and explain why that's a problem. So the reason why training with kit is sometimes problematic when you are on the flat range, you're specifically focusing on shooting drills, is for most people, it serves as a distraction. Now here's what I mean by that. If you're a new person to training and equipment, or maybe you're a new recruit at your law enforcement agency or in the military even, and you haven't had a lot of time, you haven't spent a lot of time in kit, you are going to spend a considerable amount of brain power being distracted by the shoulder pads, your cummerbund, how uncomfortable it is, if it's sagging, if it's weird, if your little holster hangers digging into your leg. Like lots of different things are going to be distracting you from actually processing what is happening with shooting while you're doing stuff. And you're just gonna have less efficiency when you're on the range trying to understand a fairly complicated thing to do. Like shooting is fairly complicated, although it is a little easier to master than people think, because you're so distracted by the equipment and the gear. So my recommendation to you, if you are a new person to equipment, is do all of this stuff, like putting it on and sizing it and playing with it, at home. You do not need to do it on the flat range. Like when you come out to the flat range and maybe you drive an hour to a range, that time on the flat range should be devoted to the martial skill of getting good at shooting. Like I would recommend not wearing kit at all for at least a while and just focusing on proficiency with your rifle and with your handgun. Now, a handgun gets a little bit different because a holster is kind of necessary for training with a handgun, whether it's from concealment or outside the waistband. But as far as like a plate carrier and kit goes, or chest rigs and helmets, you don't need to practice shooting a rifle with that stuff. You need to understand what is happening with the rifle on targets at different ranges, at different distances, what's going on with the rifle, safety manipulation, like all that normal stuff, even sling manipulation. All of that should be done slick so you can understand it sooner and get better faster. As far as the kit goes though, what most people can do is play with it at home. So as a perfect example, when I was training for the Tactical Game Sniper Challenge earlier this year, I had a big ruck that was going to have all my ammunition and my rifle, I thought, although I ended up slinging it and carrying it. And what I did was I would take all my gear home with me to the gym. I would throw all my gear on. I would get on the Stairmaster because I knew there was a lot of stairs at this event. And I was seeing how the pack was riding in relation to my plate carrier, how it was working in conjunction with my belts, looking for hot spots. And I did play with my kit quite a bit there in the gym. Then when I came to the range, I wasn't playing with my equipment. I was just focusing on precision drills at 100 meters or precision drills a little bit further, and I wasn't even wearing kit for most of it. I only put on my kit for like my last training day right before going to the event to make sure there was nothing weird going on that I didn't, I was unaware of. But I was fine, like I knew what was going on with the equipment, but I was able to get all that out of the way at home so that I could be more efficient on the range. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to separate sort of getting your kit figured out on your body separate from your training on the range so that you can be more efficient. The only things that really change when you actually do throw kit on the range, sort of, is one, you're adding all the weight, which that's going to slow people down no matter what, particularly on movement drills. Depending on your equipment, it may affect your stock placement potentially, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But a lot's not going to change that much as far as wearing the kit, as far as shooting performance goes. The issue with throwing all the kit on is the distraction, the mental distraction. While you're trying to pay attention to what's happening here, you're thinking about this stuff. And it's more of an issue than most people realize. And I'm saying this as someone who used to train a lot with equipment. I mean, I was wearing kit every time I came to the range like 5-6 years ago. And I believe that's actually what slowed down the process of me being a better shooter, like as good of a shooter as I am now. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I started shooting slick more often. I started putting the kit away because I already knew how it worked really. And just focusing on the shooting, and I got better so much faster. And I wish I had done that earlier on, which is why I'm making this video in the first place, because I want you guys to be able to get better faster and sooner. And just throwing on all of your equipment is not always the answer. So after you've done a bunch of training on the range slick, so no equipment, you're just focusing on the shooting and doing everything properly, and you've kind of played with your equipment at home to make sure it kind of fits right and everything, it is a good idea to throw it into the training equation at some point to actually test very specific things with the equipment to see if it's prohibiting your ability to shoot or if it's enabling you to be able to shoot in different circumstances. What I often see a lot of people do is they throw all the kit on, they go to the firing line like this. I have a target 7 meters away, and all they do is ready up drills from here. I'm just gonna say, wearing your kit for a ready up drill at 7 meters, you're not getting anything out of it. You're not learning your equipment, you're not learning how the gun interacts with your equipment, you're in a very sterile environment, you're just doing ready ups on a target. You would be just as served ditching the kit and just doing ready ups on the target and not even wearing the kit. If you actually want to test the equipment in relation to shooting and putting both together, there's a few things that I highly recommend. First off is moving, because adding all the extra weight does affect some of the timing of driving the gun on different targets while you're arriving in and out of position. Shooting from positions is also a very big deal when you start adding equipment, specifically shooting in the prone, shooting from weird low positions and things like that, because shooting slick, you're not going to run into as many problems as when you throw the equipment on. But if you're just on the firing line, don't kid yourself. You're not getting a lot out of training with the kit if you're just static and doing basically nothing. Now, one reason to train with kit is to work reloads and make sure your pouches are set up properly. So sometimes I will, just go to like the 50, so I have a far enough target that it kind of makes sense for doing a rifle reload from there. And I'll work reloads from every single pouch and just make sure, hey, every pouch is working where I need it to. It's somewhat fast. I'm somewhat, competent with it. Granted, you can do that in dry fire. You don't even have to live fire that. And then the other one is rifle to pistol transitions. That can also be done in dry fire. You don't have to do that with live fire. But those are like specific kit things that you do need kit in order to practice. But when it comes to just doing this right here, just I'm not getting anything out of doing that with the plate carrier on or without. I'm not. If I go over here and shoot the scrambler drill, which is a 4-position course of fire starting at 20 meters, moving to 10, and I'm shooting on the move, and I'm arriving in and out of position, and I'm driving the gun, and I'm moving around with all this extra weight, that will actually allow me to be more used to shooting in kit than doing something like this. So if you are starting to integrate kit into your training on the range, make sure it actually makes sense so that you can be as efficient as possible. One of my favorite mistakes, and I'm gonna say this is a mistake. You can agree or disagree, but I've seen this be a mistake, is people who train with gloves immediately. And I've had this. I've had ODA guys and cops show up to the firing line with their gloves already on for the first drill of the day. And these are guys who do not shoot pistol well. Like, they do not. Rifle's like a little bit better, but pistol's not good. And the problem with wearing gloves immediately, if you don't fully understand what is going on with shooting a handgun and what you should pay attention to, is you are losing so much dexterity and input, like information on the handgun, just from having this barrier between you and the gun. And I know that sounds like a little bit like tree huggery or whatever, but depending on how thick and big your gloves are, it makes a huge difference in the learning process. So I tell everyone, I haven't taught a class in a long time, but like, back when I was teaching classes, if I saw guys on the firing line with gloves, I told them, take the gloves off right now. You can put them on later if you want to see how it changes things. But initially, as we're covering proper grip pressure, how to properly grip the handgun in some cases, because some guys, don't even do that. We're not wearing this because this is going to distract and get in the way of good learning experiences. So again, this is one of those things where learn to shoot without, so you know what you need to pay attention to, you know what it feels like, you know what it smells like, you know what it tastes like, all that good stuff. And then later, if you want to see how the gloves slow you down or how problematic they are, then throw them on and train with them. But don't wear shooting gloves like your first day on the range thinking it's going to do something. It's actually going to make it worse, and you're not going to understand shooting as fast. Use the gloves later. So my overall recommendation is pretty simple. When you are just starting shooting, focus on the shooting. Get good at shooting, understand it, feel what it's like, shooting handgun, rifle without gloves on, just figuring out what is going on with the martial skill of shooting and becoming highly proficient at that. Later on, I think there's a lot of benefit in adding equipment in to see how the equipment affects the shooting performance and how the equipment is either enabling you or hurting your performance and how it's hurting your performance, and then seeing if you need to change your equipment, maybe purchase something smaller, slicker, smaller, move pouches, move things out of the way. Maybe you have a giant med pouch over your holster and you realize I can't draw the handgun once I throw my plate carrier on. Like, that's all stuff that you should figure out, and you can either do that on the range in live fire a little bit, or you can do that in dry fire, which I know is not as cool, it's not as fun, but you can figure out 90-something% of your kit issues, probably 90% or more, at home with dry fire. You do not have to be on the live fire range to figure that stuff out. For the most part, really nothing with kit requires live fire. It can all be done with dry fire, but there is something to be said for, once you do come out to the range and you do start running and gunning, being used to the equipment. So I do think that's something you should add in. What I do right now for my personal training is it's 3/4 slick, 1/4 with kit, outside of any sort of weird work stuff going on. So when I'm on the range, I typically shoot slick for the entire time, and then maybe at the end, I throw on my plate carrier, and I already have my belt on, but I throw my plate carrier on, probably not my helmet, sometimes my helmet, and then I shoot an assessment drill, like our 50-round carbine or the scrambler, or like the Matt Pranka's CQB assessment. And I shoot that in all the battle rattle, all the kit, and I see what's going on. But again, that drill is primarily testing the shooting ability, right? The martial skill of shooting. It's not actually testing the skill of wearing gear, because that's not a skill. Throwing gear on, anyone can do. You can dress up a monkey. Like, putting this stuff on and then training with it a bunch, like, you don't become an expert at wearing gear. Like, that doesn't exist. What matters is what you do on those guys down there, in what time, how accurately, and how consistently. Like, that's ultimately what matters. This is just stuff that we throw on, because we have to, or maybe we want to. That's the important stuff down there. And that's why, and this is why I believe training with kit should be approached very purposefully and very thoughtfully, so that you can be very good at doing the stuff down there that actually matters, and use the kit appropriately so that's not slowing you down. And I'm saying this as a guy who runs a kit company. Like, I sell kit. I sell plate carriers like this. This is our new AC0 plate carrier right here. Like, it would make sense for me to tell you all always wear kit in training, because we would sell more of it. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying, hey, focus on the training part, focus on the shooting, focus on actually getting good, and then have the kit there to supplement and you can be prepared with it and have it, but don't let that distract from the process of getting good at shooting. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Go ahead and leave them below. If you have further points that you want to make, there may be a follow-up video as well. But this is just what I have learned over the last 10 years of shooting, running lots of kit early on to now I don't use it quite as much. And then also from talking to lots of different people and different units who approach live fire training the exact same way. When they're on the live fire range, they shoot slick. When they get to the shoot house, they throw all their kit on. And that's how a lot of these professional organizations are doing things now. And they're finding that it's much more productive to focus on the flat range as a flat range, and then all their other training that is separate, they treat it differently. So hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next one.